We continue now at the top of Daf Samach Gimel Amud Aleph and Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 63a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing a case in which individuals borrowed peiros shvius, the produce of shvius, and then they paid back with other produce in the 8th year. By that time, the peiros shvius were no longer around. And so the question is, does the fruit, the produce which they pay back with, does that obtain the kedusha shvius or not? And the Gemara said on the previous summit it does not have the kedusha shvius because, again, by the time that it was paid back, the peiros shvius are already gone. And the Gemara said that it's similar to what we find in a brisa by Esnan. Esnan is referring to the payment that is made to a prostitute. Generally speaking, Esnan Zona, the payment to a prostitute, is not allowed to be brought as an offering on the Mizbeach, as an offering in the Beis HaMikdash. But the brisa says if there's a delay, meaning to say, let's say the person has the relations with the Zona and then only later pays the Esnan, or the other way around, let's say pays the Esnan and only later on has relations with the Zona, so then we say that the Isser is not Chal upon the Esnan, and it is allowed to be brought as an offering. And the Gemara now is in the middle of asking on this brisa, in the case where the person first pays and then has relations with the Zona, so why is it okay? Leichol alo iser esnan lemafreya. What we should say is that lemafreya, retroactively, the prohibition of esnan should be chal upon that which was given to the Zona, because, as Rashi here explains, leichol alei iser esnan lemafreya sharei mitchila al menas biya nasnu lo, because originally, when he gave her this gift that he was giving for the act of prostitution, it was given on the condition that she's going to have relations with him. And so therefore, that's exactly what we should say. We should say that we should, limafreya, retroactively, whatever was given is actually included in the prohibition of esnan and should not be able to be brought as an offering. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rebbe Lazar says, Kishakadma v'hikrivatu. The case of the brisa is that she actually already brought it as an offering. In other words, she brought it as an offering before the act of relations, and so therefore, at that point in time already when she brought it, it does not have the Isser Esnan, and that's why it's going to be considered to be mutter to have been brought as an offering. The Gemara continues and asks, Hey Chidami, well, what exactly is the case? If what he said to her was that you're going to acquire it from now, right now you acquire this, and again that's before the act of relations, so then pshita deshari, it's obvious that it's permitted. To halese b'shasbi, it's not even around anymore at the time of the relations, and the Bach notes that some take out the next line, umatana bialma hu de yohevlan, it's just a gift that he's giving her. V'ida lo amar lo knilach me'achshav, and now if he doesn't say that the acquisition is going to be from now, so then we're back to the question, hechi motzi Karva, how could she bring it? Again, if we're saying the Bryce is saying that she brought it early, even before the act of relations, but how could she do that? She hasn't really acquired anything. V'ish ki yakdish as beso kodesh amar achmana. The pasuk says that when you consecrate something, when you make something hektish, it has to be as beso kodesh. It has to be like his house. Ma beso berashuso, just like a person's house is in his possession. Af kol berashuso, so too anything that's made hektish has to be in the person's possession, and so therefore it wouldn't be possible to bring the offering earlier than the act of relations if she hadn't acquired the esnan at that time. And so the Gemara says, Ella, rather, the case is as follows. The Yomar Allah, what he says to her is as follows. Lahavik gaboch ad shasbiya, you can have this until the time of the relations. V'im mitzdarich loch kini me'achshav, and if you need it, so then the acquisition will be from now. And so since he added that line, and then again, she did need it, and she had to bring it as a carbon, therefore that is considered to be an acquisition, and that's the chiddush of the brisa. It's not obvious, because it wasn't a straight case of me'achshav, so it's not pshita, it's not obvious, but again, because it was fundamentally me'achshav, that's why the offering is considered to be good. And Rashi explains, again, the Gemara initially said Kini Me'achshav, that he said you can acquire it from now. Kodem Bia, even before the act of Bia, you can acquire it. So then it's Pshita, then it's obvious to mutter. It's obvious that it's permitted to bring it as an offering. Ti'afagav da almenas Bia Yohavin Nihila, even though he gave it to her on the condition of the act of Bia. Kevin de Mekame Bia Yohavin Nihila, but since he gave it to her before that, Lav Schar Bia, so it's not really payment for the Bia. And Rashi continues, the Gemara ultimately answers, V'im mitzdarech loch kni me'achshav, that what he tells her is, if you need it, you can acquire it from now. Hilkach, therefore, itzrich mas nisal ashmina, therefore, the Brisa does need to teach this case. The afagav de amar loch, because even though he said to her, lo nikni loch at shas bia, that you're not going to acquire it until the time of the bia, kevan de hadar amar loch, since he then later, after that line, he said to her, im mitzdarech loch kni me'achshav, that if you need it, so then you can acquire it from now, havela matnas chinam ki shakalte va'akrivte, therefore it's considered to be a gift at the time that she does take it and bring it as an offering. And the Gemara continues again. The Gemara said above that kishakidma v'hikrivatu, if she brought it earlier before the act of bia, so then it's going to be considered a good offering. It's going to be mutter as an offering. And so the Gemara along those lines asks the following question. Boy, Rav Hoshia asks, kidma v'hiktishatu ma, what if she doesn't bring it early, but she does consecrate it? She makes it a hektish as a carbon early. What would the halacha be in that case? Is that also going to be permitted to bring it as a carbon? Kevan damar mar, since the master said, Ami raso legavoa kemisi raso lehedyot, this is a general rule that when you say something legavoa to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning you consecrate something, you make it hektish, that is like a kinyan, in the same way that physically giving something to a regular person is a kinyan. So therefore, command akriv te dami, so already making it hektish, it's as if she already brought it as an offering, and so therefore it would be mutter. As we said above, it would be identical as the case above. Odilma, or maybe hashtamia hakoi v'ise be'ene. Right now it is still in front of us, meaning to say she hasn't actually brought it as an offering, and then she goes ahead and she has the act of bia, and so maybe now it would be problematic to bring it as an offering. And the Gemara says v'tivshat mid Rebbe Elazar, but why not answer it from what the Rebbe Elazar said just above? Rebbe Elazar said at the top of the Yamud. The Yamud Rebbe Elazar shekidma v'hikrivato, because again Rebbe Elazar said that if she goes ahead and offers it early before the act of bia, so then we say it's a good offering. So davka hikrivato, that sounds like only if she offered it. Aval hiktishaso, but let's say she just made it hektish, so low, so it sounds like that would not be good, so that should be the answer. And the Gemara says to that, Rebbe Elazar gufe kami boile, even within Rebbe Elazar we really have a question. We don't even know what Rebbe Elazar meant. Because what exactly is Rebbe Elazar saying? Mifshad pshita leila Rebbe Elazar dikrivatu davka, is it obvious to Rebbe Elazar that only if she offered it, it's mutter? Aval hiktishaso low, but if she made it hektish, that would not be good. Because the animal is around at the time of the act of relations. Oh, Dilmar, maybe hikrivato pshitale. Maybe it was just that Rebbe Elazar knew for sure that if she offered it, it's okay. Vikdishaso masafkale, but maybe in terms of hikdishaso, he actually was in doubt. So maybe Rebbe Elazar wasn't saying that he was certain that it would be no good. He wasn't sure. And the Gemara says to that take, where the Gemara leaves that as a question. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The other case in the Braisa was ba'aleh, if he has relations with her, v'achar kach nosan law, and then later, after that, he gives her the esnan, esnona mutter. So then we say also the esnan is mutter because it wasn't given at the time of the bia. And the Gemara says, Uramini, we have a contradiction on that from the following brisa. Ba'aleh, it says if he had relations with her, v'achar kach nosan lo, and then he gave it to her later. Afilu mikan ad shalosh shanim, even if it's already 3 years later that he gives it to her. Esnona aser, so then we say that the esnan is aser. It's forbidden to bring it as an offering. It seems to be a direct contradiction to what we just said. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok, Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok says that if Chisda says lo kasha, it's not difficult. Hado Amar hisboali li betleze. In one case we're talking where he says have relations to me for this particular sheep, so he's already designated the animal. And Hadi Amar, in the other case, it's when he says to her hisboali betlestam, he says have bia with me for a sheep, but he doesn't designate the specific teleh. And Rashi explains, Betlezef, he says, with this sheep, so Kalkama Diyavla, whenever he gives it to her, Havi Esnan, it will be considered an Esnan, it will be prohibited. Demehashta Kanise, because the kinyan comes from right now. But Betlestam, but if he just says for a sheep, so then Kiyoiv Lo La'achar Zman, if he gives it to her after some time, so Lav Esnanhu, that's not called Esnan anymore. Tehashtahu, the Kanyula, because she's acquiring it at this time later on, and so therefore in such a situation, it actually would be mutter. But the Gemara continues and asks, but even if he says that it's for this particular sheep, my havin, what difference does that make? She doesn't acquire it just because he says that. But it's missing Mashicha. You need to make a physical kinyan. She would need to pull it into her reshus. And so therefore, betlezeh should not make any difference. At the end of the day, if she's getting it later on, it's still later on. And the Gemara answers, Bezona ovedas kochavim to lokanya b'mashicha. The first answer the Gemara gives is we're talking here about a prostitute who is an idolater. She's not Jewish, and there's no halacha of mashicha over there, and that's why since it's not really missing mashicha, it actually is considered to be a kinyan from that time that he said b'telezeh. V'ibay Semen, if you want, I could say another answer, liolam bezona Yisraelis, where really we're talking about a Jewish prostitute, ukegon dekoy b'chatzer, and the case could be where the animal is in her chatzer, and so therefore she can acquire it through a kinyan chatzer. She doesn't need to do a mashicha. But the Gemara says, he dekoy b'chatzera, but if it's in her chatzer, so you have a case again where he has the relations with her and then later on he gives it to her. That's the case we're talking about. But hakanyula, what do you mean it's achar kach nasan law? She's already acquired it already really from now because it's been sitting in her chatzer. And the Gemara continues and answers, Lo no tzricha, it's necessary, the shavya nihila apotiki, that she designated it as an apotiki. An apotiki is when you designate one specific item to pay off your debt. This is the item that you're going to collect for the debt that I owe you. And the Gemara clarifies, the Yamar law that he says to her as follows, if I bring you money from now until a particular deadline, a particular day, so then good. And if not, shakle besnanach, then you should take this apotiki, you should take this animal as the esnan, and so therefore really it is a situation where the kinyan only happens after the act of relations. And Rashi explains, Oved Kochavim Lav Bar Meshicha. First of all, an Oved Kochavim, an idolater, again, is not in the category of Meshicha. There's no concept of a kinyan of Meshicha by Oved Kochavim. Techi Ksiva Meshicha B'Yisrael Ksiva, because Meshicha is actually written by Jews. It says, Okanu Miyad HaMisecha. It says HaMisecha. It's referring to a Yisrael. And then the Gemara said, Hakanya Loa Mehashta Kodem Bia. Isn't the kinyan already before the act of relations? Meaning to say, if it's sitting in her chutzner, the kinyan really should be right away. Vehechi Kari Le Ba Lev Yachakach Nasan. How can you even refer to that as a case of Ba'aleh, first having the relations, and Achar Kach Nasan, then giving it to her? And so the Gemara continued and answered that the case was, it was an apotiki, and he phrased it as follows. He said, V'ilo shakle b'yom ploni besnenoch. He said, if I don't pay you, so then you should take this apotiki as the esnan, if I don't pay you by a certain deadline. Hilkach ba'aleh v'yachar kach nasan lahu. Therefore, technically speaking, it satisfies what we said above, that it's a case of relations first, and then he only gave it to her later on, because you're waiting for the deadline. If he doesn't pay, so then she takes it. But then the question is again, if that's the case, so why are we saying that it's problematic to bring it as an offering in this situation of Telazeh? And that's what Rashi says, Umiu, nevertheless, Hoelu mishas bia, shavya apotiki, since this was made in apotiki from the time of the act of relations, v'yomad bechatzer, and it was sitting in her own chatzer, so chayel ola esnan, so the halach of esnan is chal, it takes effect upon it, and that's why it's no good as an offering. And the Gemara now returns to the case of the Peiros Shvius, again the cases where the person borrows the Peiros Shvius during the Shemitah year, and then he pays back with other Peiros in the 8th year, and we said above that since there is a delay and he paid back after those Peiros Shvius are long gone, so then that produce that was given in the 8th year will not have the Kedusha Shvius. And the Gemara continues, Mesav Rav Sheshas asks on this, it says in a Braisa, Omer Adam Lechamarav Ulepoal, of a person can say to his donkey drivers and to his workers, Lechu ve'ichlu b'dinar zeh, go and eat what you need to eat, take this dinar, Tzu'u shesu b'dinar zeh, go and drink with this dinar, ve'eno choshesh, and there's no concern. And Rashi explains, Mesav Rav Sheshas l'Rab Yanai, this is a question to Rab Yanai. Again, Rab Yanai is the one that said by the Peiros Shvius, where you pay back in the 8th year, that it is permitted, it doesn't have the Kedusha Shvius. So the Braisa says, if he says Lepoalav ulechamorav, he says to his workers and his donkey drivers, and these are either Ovdei Kochavim, either they're idolaters, or Amei Haaretz, or we could be talking about Amei Haaretz, who aren't so careful in halacha, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Gimel Amid Beis.